Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? Welcome back into another episode of the pod. My name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. Oh.
What's up?
How we doing?
Doing all right. How about you?
I just got a notification on my recording software that something went wrong, but it's still recording, so we're good. That's why I said oh. But anyway, yeah, what's going on, Rick?
Sus, but we'll go with it. Yeah, doing all right. Ready to talk about some football.
Yeah, dude. We got some interesting shows this week. We're going to talk about our top 5 second-year wide receivers like we did last week. Second-year running backs. This week we're going to do second-year wide receivers. And then we're going to talk about, I always say talk about every time I say this, but we're going to do a mock draft, a real redraft mock draft.
Oh, let's go. First mock draft of the year, right?
Yeah. So it should be fun. We'll do one basically every week. I literally wrote down redraft mock 101 or mock draft 1.0. And I think that number will be very, very high. By the time
we'll probably do like 7.
Maybe 20.
Or 25, yeah. Who knows?
Who knows? But anyway, so today we're going to talk about top 5 second-year wide receivers. Before we do that, check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all those social media platforms. You're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platforms. Please leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like and comment down below any questions you may have about our top 5 wide receiver second-year wide receiver list. So yeah, we're inching ever so slowly towards the NFL season. It's like a turtle.
It is a turtle, yeah. I mean, honestly.
15 weeks.
We're so excited once the draft gets here, and then the draft happens, and then it's like, okay, now we got to wait 3+ months.
3.5 months.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Good thing we're hoping that the basketball can extend my viewing. Because once training camps happen, that's when it starts really becoming a thing for me. Like, it's real. Like, okay, we're almost here. But until that happens, it's just like
it's nothingness.
An abyss.
Yeah,
dark abyss. But we do get to talk about fantasy football for a little while and break down some players. So anyway.
Yeah.
Let's jump. We don't have a lot of time to get to this. Rick's on a deadline here. Rick's on a big deadline.
I am, unfortunately.
And I don't pay for Zoom, so we gotta.
So we have a deadline in multiple ways.
Yeah. All right. So let's jump into our top 5 second-year wide receivers and discuss some of the variables that we have with these players, why we rank them, where we rank them, and the guys that you should be targeting as we head into the upcoming fantasy football season. Why am I yawning?
I don't know.
Oh, it's freaking.
It's only 3 o'clock
in the afternoon. But let's get it started. So, first on the list, we got Jamar Chase. I don't just think this guy should be the top guy in the rookie wide receiver list here, but
this might be the wide receiver 1 or 2.
Second year, this guy might be the top 1-2 guy. I think he has sleeper upside to be the number 1 wide receiver overall in fantasy football.
Absolutely.
And in fact, while I'm sitting here, let me reload the wide receiver page and see where the rest of the folks are ranking him in the fantasy community. So they have him, the expert consensus on Fantasy Pros, which is 59 experts.
Do you do half PPR or full?
I don't even know. PPR.
So we can be on the same page.
I'm
okay.
on PPR right now.
You're on PPR? Okay.
So is Jamar Chase. He's 4 on that list.
He's 3.5 PPR.
So He's definitely already up there in that conversation. As a rookie, through 18 weeks, he finished as a top 6 wide receiver as a rookie.
Ridiculous.
And, I don't think that his
historic
quarterback. I don't think that his quarterback's going to get any worse.
No, if anything,
He's probably going to get better.
Right. Offensive line improves.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I think Chase has to be number 1 on the second year wide receiver list only because, obviously he had one of the best seasons ever as a wide receiver, as a rookie, but he's just ridiculously talented. He's the number 1 wide receiver on the Bengals. The Bengals this offseason, not only did they get better, but they improved their offensive line. And so they didn't need to add many skill positions, which they didn't. They probably could use a tight end. That's the only complaint I have.
Sure.
But their offensive line is very much improved. And I think that you're going to see Jamar Chase ascend into a category of, the Devontae Adams and Michael Thomases that we've had over the last 4 or 5 years. So that's where Chase is going to be. That's where his name's going to be. And I'm targeting Chase in leagues if you can get him, at least at a good value. Like, I mean, obviously I don't know that I want to draft him in the first round, but I do think Chase has number 1 upside this year if he's given, the amount of opportunity that he has been given in the past. I mean, what he did with 128 targets is absurd.
Yeah, it really is.
He had fantasy points per target, 2.38.
He had almost 1,500 receiving yards as a rookie. 13 touchdowns. I mean, just insane numbers.
He would be on, if he got 150 targets, based on his 2.38 fantasy points per target, he would have 357 fantasy points.
Where would that put? That would put him in the Cooper Kupp range, right?
Yeah.
And Cooper Kupp had one of the best wide receiver seasons of all time.
So this guy is only going to get better, and there's no conversation at this point. He's way better than everyone else in the class. That's the reason why he was drafted as high as he was in the NFL draft. So,
yep. Yeah, with Chase, there's not really too much to talk about. He's the clear number 1 guy. An underdog right now. He's a top 5 pick for best ball. Yeah, I mean they have their system's a little weird. They have 3 receivers going in the top 5. So, but either way, he's. I think by the time we get to August, he's going to be a first round pick. Right now, he's not. I know we looked at ADP the last show, I believe. It was either last show or the show before that, and Chase was in the 2nd round. I don't think that's going to stay. Right. I think he's going to end up being a first round pick. But if that stays, I mean, he's going to be one of the easiest 2nd round picks of all time. He's a stud. I think he's a top 3 receiver in fantasy. And as you said earlier, a dark horse to be the number 1 guy. Yeah,
I agree. He had 627 unrealized air yards.
627?
On top of the 1,400 that he actually got.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's a little bit ridiculous. I think he's a very good wide receiver.
Yeah.
All right, so obviously he goes number 1, but let's talk about the second guy, who is Jaylen Waddle. And this is where a conversation kind of needs to be had. This is where things start getting a little more interesting. Now, Waddle last year was the wide receiver 16 through 18 weeks. And he had a very, very good rookie campaign. He was clearly the Dolphins wide receiver 1, and honestly, he was one of my most exciting like potential draft selections leading into this year until they got Tyreke Hill. I want to get your thoughts, Rick, on Tyreke Hill and how it affects Jaylen Waddle, and if that is something that concerns you moving forward, or is it something that benefits Jaylen Waddle a little bit?
I think it absolutely does benefit him, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's a good thing for fantasy perspective, because it's going to benefit him in some ways, because it's going to take some of the pressure off of him, some of the top defenders off of him. He's going to get face number 2 corners and all those things. But to I don't think he's the type of quarterback to throw 40 touchdowns and win league MVP. So there's only going to be so many targets, yards, touchdowns to go around. And Tyree Kill is going to demand a huge share of that. And I think we both would agree that Tyree Kill is probably going to be the number one option between those two, and is going to finish higher,
of course,
most likely in fantasy, which means can Tua produce two top 10, two top 12 receivers? I don't think he can.
No.
So that kind of caps off what Waddle can do.
If it was Mahomes,
yes,
of course.
Oh yeah, Herbert, yeah.
Nope. Not Tua Tagovailoa.
No, I don't think Tua is quite there. I mean, we could be wrong. Maybe Tua wins MVP this year and throws 40 touchdowns, but I don't really see that happening. And I think Waddle can obviously still be very good.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to still, I think, have a lot of receptions. And let's say he can duplicate what he did this past year. I don't know if he gets 142 targets though, but maybe his targets go down to like 130. But maybe he gets a couple more yards and more than 6 receiving touchdowns because the offense is better. And I could see that. And he was wide receiver 15 in terms of points per game, 15 fantasy points per game. That's pretty solid. Mm-hmm. And I think he could stay in that range, maybe even go a spot or two higher. I know he's getting drafted as wide receiver 14, I think, on Underdog. So and that's where he's ranked in Fantasy Pros as well. I think that's probably a good spot for him. I think that's kind of where I could see him going and finishing. The problem with it is just I don't really see him doing much more than that. There's no huge top 5 season incoming for Waddle.
No. I think it definitely fantasy wise caps
even
Waddle.
top 7.
And I think you are right in real life that it will help Waddle get open. And honestly, I'm very, very, very curious to see what this team wants to do with these two guys. Because
and what it looks like on the field.
Waddle is insanely fast. Hill is insanely fast. And they're kind of the same receiver. And it's like, what do you do with that?
I feel like a really good offensive mind should be able to use that to his advantage and figure it out. I don't know if the Dolphins are able to, and if what is his name? What's the new Dolphins head coach from San Francisco? Is it Mike McDaniel?
Yeah,
I know Mike McDaniel's an offensive mind, and some people think he's a genius. Other people think he's kind of an idiot. So we're gonna see.
We're gonna find out.
We're gonna find out.
What is your take? Because I don't have one.
If I had to bet, I would say I would lean no. It's not going to work. Yeah. And when I say not going to work, I mean not work to what they want. Mm-hmm. They'll still be good. But, I mean, it's more of an uncertainty thing because I could also see a possibility where he does figure it out. And because he's a good offensive mind, he's able to get those guys to work together really well and create a high-powered, at least maybe not the best team, but an explosive offense. And I could see that possibility as well. It's just question marks with Waddle. That's his problem. But he still is good enough where he's the number 2 guy on this list.
Yeah. And to have 142 targets in your rookie season
and 100 catches.
And 100 catches is very, very good. I mean, he was a slot receiver. So like we were talking about the last guy, right? A dot is essentially is the average target distance that a player gets. Jamar Chase's A dot was 12. So his average target distance was 12 yards. Jaylen Waddle's is 6.3. So he basically is half that. And he plays the slot receiver role currently, or at least last season he did, for the Miami Dolphins. And so I don't think that target distance is going to change for him.
Yeah.
Which
he's
makes
8th in the NFL in receptions.
I know. But it kind of limits his fantasy point per target opportunity because he's not going to get as much yards. And so most of this is going to be on touchdowns. So it's at 1.73 right now. And he needs those 140, 150 targets just to get into a real conversation of being a top 12, top 10 wide receiver, which I think he could do. But like Rick said, the chances of Tua Tagovailoa carrying 2 top 10 wide receivers is not super high.
It's low. Yeah.
And I think if I had to choose one, obviously you have to choose Tyreke Hill. So Waddle definitely gets hit by that. I think he's a solid wide receiver too. On our redraft show on Thursday, I'm curious to see where Waddle ends up going in our draft. Mm-hmm. But like even air yards, like he had 895 air yards, number 42 in the NFL among receivers. Just to give you an idea of where Chase was, the last guy we talked about, he's 1,500 air yards. So it's definitely, he's a different type of receiver and a different type of offense. And I think that you're going to see Mike McDaniel, you're going to see Waddle in the slot. I think Hill will play the X on the outside. And they'll utilize Hill's speed to open things up underneath for Waddle, which I think could benefit him. But the question is, does he get that target share going into 2022 enough so that you can look at him and be like, all right, this is a guy that I want on my fantasy team. I think he's a great flex option at this point, but I don't know how high the ceiling is for this season. I think knowing how Tua is going to play and not knowing how Hill fits into that situation.
Right. I think Waddle will be a great fantasy option. It's just he doesn't have the same ceiling as some other guys. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not even close to Chase. Yeah. Now, if he does somehow get 140 targets again, or maybe even more, because you've only played in 16 games. So let's say, what was that pace out to in 17 games? Like 150? 148. Yeah. If he does that again, then, I mean, maybe we could have that discussion. Because he only had, again, 6 touchdowns. So,
and if he's more efficient than he was last year, then that definitely could.
Theoretically, Tyree Kill should make him more efficient. That's the only scenario I see, though.
It just depends on how often that they choose to pass it. But you also look at some other things really quickly before we move on to the next guy. Target quality, which is it basically combines catchable targets with the average target depth. Putting a premium, I'm reading the description on Player Profiler, by the way, putting a premium on deep catchable targets and discounting shorter uncatchable passes. So target quality rating was 4.23, which was number 88 among receivers. And that's a direct impact on your quarterback.
Yikes.
Catchable target rate, 66.2, 94 targets, 88th in the league. Again, his true catch rate, Rick, 110%. I didn't know you could go over that.
Wow, he's third in the NFL.
Yeah. So Waddle's a great receiver, but the quarterback is not a great quarterback. And I don't know that the ceiling is going to be there for Tua to excel at a high level. I could be dead wrong, but
yeah,
the combination of things. Now, I was going to say too really quickly.
A real jump.
Say it again, sorry.
Tua would need a real jump.
Yeah, Tua would need a huge jump, which could happen, right? I mean, we've seen quarterbacks in the past struggle, and then you
Tyree
put talents around
them. If anybody's going to help develop a quarterback, Tyreke Hill is definitely one of the best to do that.
100%. But I was going to say, so there is some what do you want to call it? Vacated targets for the Miami Dolphins. Because they did trade away Devontae Parker to the Patriots, and he had 73 targets last year. So, and I think there was another guy that ended up walking. So, with some of that vacated target share, you could see Miami obviously shift those targets to Tyree Kill. But I feel like it's going to be more like Waddle getting 100 to 120 targets and Hill getting 120 to 130 targets, which, obviously doesn't help fantasy-wise for Jaylen Waddle unless he becomes more efficient, which I'm not sure he's going to. So I think mid-range wide receiver 2 is definitely his most likely outcome. And I think there's a small ceiling that he could finish as a wide receiver 1, but I don't have a very strong and good feeling about Jaylen Waddle's opportunity to become a top-end wide receiver like Chase does or Justin Jefferson does, even after having a great rookie season. So
I'm trying to see where the Dolphins are. Yeah, they have 183 apparently vacated targets, which is a decent amount.
Yeah, that's good.
But Tyree Kill is going to take like most of that.
Yeah. I mean, so the question that you have to answer, and we'll try to do that over the course of the offseason, is, obviously we know the vacated target share, but is what is vacated and what Waddle what Hill is coming in to do, is there going to be target share taken away from Jaylen Waddle?
See, yeah, and that's a good question because I don't really know. I mean, if there's that many vacated targets and Hill takes most of them, obviously there'll be other players that will take those targets. The Dolphins do throw the ball a lot too. They were in the top 10 last season in pass attempts. So
can you send me what you're looking at
for the vacated targets?
Yeah, my guy.
Yeah, I got you. But
you want to move on to the next guy?
Yeah, we can do that.
Right. So number 3, Rashad Bateman, and I think a lot of people are going to be like, "What the frick? Why Bateman?" Well, there was a trade that happened at the NFL, and actually, I think it benefits both sides. Okay,
it does.
Hollywood Brown goes into an offensive system in a trade to the Arizona Cardinals, which leaves one wide receiver in Baltimore, and that's Rashad Bateman. And I don't believe they drafted a guy, did they?
I don't think they did.
Yeah, so
I'll double check. They might have taken someone late round.
I can't remember who. I'm gonna check in the depth charts on Player Profiler just to see who the Ravens have currently as wide receivers.
Ravens took no
wide receivers. So right now their wide receiver set consists of Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, James Proche, Tylan Wallace.
Oh my gosh!
And Benjamin Victor.
You would have to think they signed somebody.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say they do sign somebody. But as of right now, Rashad Bateman is the number one guy in that.
And honestly, who would they sign that would instantly be the number one guy?
There's still Julio and
I think if you sign Julio, he's your number 2. I don't think he's.
And then you have on the flip side of that too. You have Odell, who still can be a wide receiver 1, but the problem is with Odell is he's not going to play until November.
Yeah.
So I mean, Bateman. They like Bateman. They took him in the first round. He had a decent rookie season: 67 targets, 46 catches, 515 yards, 1 touchdown, 8.6 fantasy points per game.
1 touchdown.
But with give me the vacated targets for the Ravens.
The Ravens are in the top 5, I believe, in vacated targets. Yeah, they are 4th with 267 vacated targets because Sammy Watkins also left.
So with that amount of vacated target share, you're not only looking at Rashad Bateman, who only had 67 targets last year, I think jumping up into the 120 to 130 target conversation. I think he's going to get targeted similar to that of Hollywood Brown and what Hollywood did last year, which is around 120 targets. So I think you're going to see that, and I think that's why he's number 2 on my list. Not number 3 on this list, is because I think he's a guy that is definitely going to end up with the most target share of the guys that we have left. And we're talking about guys like Amon-Ra, Elijah Moore, Devonta Smith, Kadarius Toney, Rondale Moore, stuff like that. Wide receivers like that. So it's like for Bateman, him sliding in at number 3 has to do with his clear opportunity to become the number 1 wide receiver and clear opportunity to get 120 or more targets from the Ravens. But they also got, if they don't add anyone, they got some sleepers here with Duvernay and even Proche. So
I actually, who's the other guy? Tylan Wallace. Pre-draft, I liked Tylan Wallace, and then I remember he went to the Ravens in the 4th round, and then everybody was like, "Well, he's dead." Yeah. So he's someone too who could emerge as at least
something,
a wide receiver 3 or something.
But the opportunity share for Rashad is very, very high, and I think he could be that guy for the Ravens. Where Hollywood was a field stretcher, and I liked him a lot, and I still like him a lot. But I don't think he can be that X outside receiver. Bateman, his comp on Player Profiler is Stefon Diggs. And so I think he can be that guy on the outside. He can play the X. and he can play the Y and be fine. He's big enough to do it. So I think that's what the Ravens want. And so that's what he's going to be for them. And I think it's going to lead to 120, 130 target season for Rashad Bateman. And I think he's an easy buy right now in Dynasty, and he's an easy draft because I don't think he's getting drafted. It's ADP right now is 6.
Definitely, especially for the more casual players and the redraft players. I think Bateman is going to be, we've been talking about this. He came out of nowhere because in our early versions of it, we were talking about Judy as a breakout guy who I still believe is on that list. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about, this year's 5th round. Mooney, I think, was somebody who I really like. Mm-hmm. Maybe someone that we're going to talk about later on the show. But someone who has jumped ever since the NFL draft, and as the offseason develops, only keeps going higher is Rashad Bateman. Because remember, pre-draft last year, he was your wide receiver 3? Mm-hmm. Like, you loved Bateman.
I freaking love Bateman. My only concern was opportunity.
Yeah, and then he got drafted to the Ravens, and then we were both like, well, that's kind of gross. And we faded him a little bit. And I think we weren't wrong because he, as a rookie, didn't do much. And then if Hollywood Brown is still there, he would be better for sure. But he wouldn't be number 3 on this list, right? But obviously with Hollywood Brown gone, it opens things up a lot for Bateman to be the guy. And even if they bring somebody in, which I think they will, it won't really be an effect on Bateman, and it'll be more of an effect on those other guys you mentioned, the Duvernay's, the Jaylen Wallace, those types of players, because they need just like a second option, a bona fide second option that you can rely on. But Bateman, to me, is one of my favorite guys. Fantasy Pros right now, and PPR has him as wide receiver 33. And to me, I would take him a full 10 spots higher than what he's at. I think Underdog, let's see, has him as, I don't know, what's ADP is 61. What round is that? 6th round, 5th round?
Yeah, 5th or 6th.
So, yeah, I like him a lot in that spot for somebody who, to me, I don't know if he's going to be a wide receiver 1 because that offense is still not pass heavy.
Yeah. Even
though they have become a lot better at it. They've thrown the ball more the last couple of years trying to do that for Lamar. But he can at least be, to me, a really good wide receiver 2. Mm-hmm. Maybe even a high-end wide receiver 2 that you're getting in the 5th round. And he's got all the talent in the world. Now, all of a sudden, he's the wide receiver 1 on the team. It's really his time to shine. It's just going to be a matter of how the offseason plays out, who they bring in. Is Bateman still the clear-cut number 1? How much are they going to throw the ball? Is he going to take all of Hollywood's targets? And how that plays out. But the situation is lined up for him.
Yeah, totally agree. Let's move on to the next guy without further ado. Number 4 is Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we've talked a lot about this guy. We don't really need to spend a million hours on him because if you've listened, you probably heard our takes on Amon-Ra. There's some big questionable situations for Amon-Ra here with the Detroit Lions. And they just drafted a wide receiver in the 1st round. They signed DJ Chark. And when they signed Chark, I was kind of like, okay, this is good for Amon-Ra. And I'm like, this is not a bad thing for Amon-Ra St. Brown. They don't play the same roles. Amon-Ra plays the slot. And Chark is a field stretcher on the outside. And I'm like, you can 100% deal with that and be okay, right? But now they have Jameson, and Jameson Williams can play inside, outside, everywhere, and he's one of my favorite wide receivers in the NFL draft this year. So I really don't know. I really have no idea what we're going to do with I'd have no idea with what we're going to do with Amon-Ra St. Brown on the Detroit Lions. And I think there's some major issues and major problems that have to be kind of sorted out if you're the Detroit Lions and figuring out what to do with this guy. But we'll have to see what happens. I mean, obviously, with the target share and what he did towards the end of the season was very, very good. He had a great rookie season, 119 targets, 90 receptions, 912 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. All did this down the stretch of the last maybe 7 to 10 weeks. So it's interesting to see how that whole situation kind of played out. But Rick, can you hear me? I can't hear you, buddy. You might have to fix your audio. But anyway, so but I do think that there's a chance that Amon-Ra could, be really good. It's just a question of how much does Jameson Williams and how much does DJ Chark's arrival affect that opportunity. And just to bring up the available targets for a team like that, the Detroit Lions don't have a lot of available targets. They have 37 available targets on their team. So they didn't lose a lot of players, and they added a lot of players. And I think that's going to come out of that'll most likely come out of Jameson Williams' target share. So, Rick, how do you feel about Amon-Ra St. Brown?
Yeah, I mean, I like Amon-Ra. I think you made a lot of good points. That offense, I'm not really worried about the offense with Amon-Ra. I think the Lions are going to be better than people think. I'm not saying they're going to be an explosive offense or anything like that, but they're going to be at least decent. It's more just the targets to go around. I don't think Jared Goff, it's kind of like Tua. Mm-hmm. Do you think Jared Goff's winning MVP or coming close and having a monster season? Like, I don't know. Does Jared Goff even throw 30 touchdowns?
Probably not.
So there's probably not a lot of efficiency to go around, a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns. I do think Jameson Williams, when he's out there, is going to demand some of it. I think DJ Chark, when healthy, is a good player. TJ Hawkinson, obviously, as well. DeAndre Swift out of the backfield. There's a lot of passing options on that team, which makes me nervous about Amon-Ra. But what he did at the end of last year,
targets too.
I did not.
37.
Yeah, so they're second to worst in the NFL in vacated targets. So that is concerning to me for Amon-Ra for sure. But he is still going to be good, and I think Jameson Williams actually was a great pick for him because it opens things up in the slot. He's going to still be he's going to be the slot guy. He's going to get a lot of reception still.
Yeah.
I just don't know, if the yards and the touchdowns are going to be that high for him. And I think it's going to kind of hurt his ceiling, but he's a safe pick. I think we talked about that before the show between this guy and the next guy. And the reason, I think Amon-Ra might be a slot higher. He's just a safer pick. You know what you're going to get. He's going to be productive.
Yeah.
He'll probably be a wide receiver too.
Right.
Maybe a lower end, but he'll be a very just solid player that you could plug in and start in PPR leagues. He's going to be decent. Kind of your classic slot guy who might have some upside depending on what happens with that Lions team. But again, he'll still have a safe and high floor.
Yeah. So I agree with all those points. The only thing that is just concerning is that they added 2 receivers. They have 37 vacated targets, and there's not many options to pull targets away. I mean, obviously those other 2 wide receivers that they have, Khalif Raymond and the other guy, the target share is going to be pulled away from those guys. I think Amon-Ra will be the last guy that loses targets, but I think at best, he probably sticks at 120 targets. At worst, he drops to 100, and that would obviously not be great for fantasy, but he is a safe pick. He's what the Lions offense is, and you know what Amon-Ra St. Brown is. And so it's he can give you a, mid to low end wide receiver 2 performance on the season next year with some, maybe a little bit of upside, but you know what you're getting with him, as opposed to the next guy who's number 5 and the last guy that we're going to talk about, Elijah Moore. Now, Elijah Moore is a little bit more risky, but if things work out for the Jets and Zach Wilson, he could end up catapulting into a much higher position. Interesting, I just read a tweet that somebody said Elijah Moore is this year's T. Higgins, and that's actually not a horrible comp.
No, for fantasy perspective, it's really not.
Because Elijah Moore is not going to be a number 1 wide receiver for the Jets. That's what they brought in Garrett Wilson to do.
Correct.
So with that being said, and they were trying to get a Tyreke Hill, they were trying to get a Deebo Samuel. They were trying to get a outside receiver, and that's what Garrett Wilson is going to do for them. Elijah Moore will probably play that secondary role similar to what T. Higgins does for the Bengals. And that doesn't necessarily mean bad things, especially if Zach is good. If Zach Wilson is a good quarterback and he has a really good second year, then I think he could carry, where I don't think Tua can. He could carry 2 wide receiver ones if he's good, right?
Possible, yeah.
If he's not good, Elijah Moore, it drops into the basement and he ends up being not good along with, Garrett Wilson. So the range of outcomes is much, much wider for Elijah Moore, and you're taking a lot more risk drafting him.
Yes.
As opposed to, Amon-Ra, where you kind of know what you're going to get. And there's still risk, obviously. There's risk drafting everyone, but Elijah Moore has this chance to be a wide receiver, top 10 wide receiver, top 12 wide receiver in fantasy football, or to just drop off the face of the earth and be complete nobody, essentially. So it could go either way with Moore, but I definitely think that he is 5th for sure, ahead of Tooney, Smith, and Rondale Moore. And a lot of people will be surprised to hear about Smith, but go look at how many times the Eagles passed it last year, and you'll find out my real thoughts.
Yeah. With Elijah Moore, obviously he's one of my guys. Pre-draft, I was high on him. I like the player a lot. The situation is going to be dependent on Zach Wilson for sure. And if you look at last year, and I said this at the time last year, he kind of had a Brandon Ayuk rookie season where he started off slow. First 3 games of the season didn't do too much. Then he got injured, and then he played 2 games against Atlanta and New England, had a less than 50% snap percentage, didn't really do much. And then from week 7 to week 13, or week 8 to week 13, he had a 6-game stretch. In those 6 games, he was on pace for 144 targets, 96 catches, 1,300 yards, 14 touchdowns. And in those 6 games, I guess it was a 7-game stretch. Mm-hmm. So through that 7-game stretch, he was the wide receiver 3 in fantasy, just behind Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson. Wow. And he was ahead of Debo in that stretch. So he had a monster stretch. Then he got hurt again and didn't play the rest of the season. So he didn't play from weeks 14 to 18. So he did have a kind of an Amon-Ra stretch. It just doesn't get talked about as much because of the reason it was in the middle of the season and then he got hurt, while Amon-Ra was just kind of at the end of the year. And I think Amon-Ra's was a little bit better, but still similar. And yeah, Garrett Wilson is there, and that is a concern. But I don't know. I think he's still a clear-cut number 2 guy. I think Corey Davis is kind of fading away into the shadows at this point in his career, unfortunately. But they kind of have a depth chart lined up, and it's going to be Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore, those 2 top guys. Yeah. So he has a role in the offense that has a lot of high expectations this year. Yep. A lot of people are saying, the Jets offense could suck because it's the Jets, but they have the potential to, if any team is going to take a Bengals leap on the offensive side of the ball, at least, it could be the Jets with the talent that they have on that team. But it is going to be dependent on Zach Wilson. I think that's why he's 5. And he's a riskier pick for sure than Amon-Ra, but I think his ceiling might be a little higher.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of people are probably surprised that Devon Smith's not on this list.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, he's number 6 and he's right behind these guys. He's in the same tier. So it's not like I'm totally off on Devontae Smith. It's just the Eagles were dead last in passing attempts last year, and they just brought in A.J. Brown. Yep. So it's like A.J. Brown is going to be the guy, and Devontae Smith will be good, especially in the real NFL. Like, I still like Devontae Smith as a player a lot. I just don't know fantasy-wise how good he's going to be with A.J. Brown there, and Jalen Hurts still is the quarterback, and Dallas Goedert as well. So there's just a lot of mouths to feed with the Eagles. And I don't know. He's going to be a good player. There's no question about that. It's just, would I take him over the guys we just talked about? Probably not.
Okay. There you have it. Top 5 second-year wide receivers out the way. I think we're going to do quarterbacks too. Not sure though, because quarterbacks are just only 4.
There really is 5, maybe.
It really is 5 guys. But anyway, we'll talk to you Thursday, guys. Mock draft.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.